Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Allan Doctor. I have to read this because, Alan, you wear a lot of hats. He is the co-founder and CSO of KaloCyte, the professor of pediatrics at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and the director of the Center for Blood Oxygen Transport and Hemostasis. Did I get that right, Alan? So, as I say there, you're wearing a lot of hats, and we'll get into speaking about KaloCyte and erythema down the line. But from your point of view, what's been kind of your journey, if you like, into this world of science and trauma care? Because you've been doing this for a number of years. But where did it all start, really?
Well, it started in my, postgraduate training when this was in the 90s when I was training to be an ICU doctor, and that's my specialty is pediatric critical care medicine. And we were taking care of children in the ICU, and they come in for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes a car accident, sometimes overwhelming infection, could be a transplant, could be you know, almost anything, big surgery. And we lost a lot of children despite understanding the underlying problem and having good therapies for it because their oxygen delivery system would fail and you couldn't correct it. So they would have what people call, irreversible shock. So the system gets shocked, okay? And unlike a car, where if something breaks, it just sits idle and you can take it into the mechanic in 2 months and it's just as easy to fix as if you take it in a day. With the human body, everything's alive. So you have a window of opportunity to start fixing things before secondary problems happen. And then the secondary problems become more important sometimes than the original problem. That makes sense. And so I found that pretty frustrating. And we realized that the main problem was that the oxygen delivery system would fail. And this is the way that blood flow gets distributed, like the routing reflexes. So right now, you're using about 1,000th of your ability to deliver oxygen by just sitting there. Now, you know that because you can get up and run, right? Or when your body gets very febrile or sick, you can really scale up the oxygen delivery.
I often look at my VO2 max as I'm a
Yeah.
runner.
There you go. Right. That's
Yeah.
a big difference from your VO2 rest. When you're at rest, and that's because we used to have to, suddenly run away from a tiger without
Mhm.
preparation. And if you couldn't, you get caught and you know, you
Yeah.
didn't you didn't reproduce. So I became very interested in how that worked and how to fix it. And it turned out that red blood cells themselves have a very important role in sensing the ability to deliver oxygen and controlling the distribution of blood flow. And that the cells can get damaged when there's injury. And then once that damage happens, then the system doesn't work. As if all the traffic lights break, okay? And then even if you turn the power back on, if they're asynchronized, then there's car accidents and snarls and so on. So the key is getting everything synchronized, and red cells do that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I got really interested in, and that's what my laboratory studied. And I was working out the chemistry of this process, minding my own business, not having anything to do with blood substitutes at all, not even thinking about it. And I got a phone call out of the blue from and now I'm a professor and I have a lab and research funding and so on. And I get a call out of the blue from someone else at my university who's a chemist, and you'll talk to him too. His name's Dr. Dipanjan Pan. So he's a synthetic chemist and he was designing little small particles called nanoparticles for imaging, where he would decorate them with homing, molecules and imaging molecules. So they would go to a special thing like a blood clot or a tumor, and then you could find them with X-ray. And these had a lot of surface area, and he realized they looked like red blood cells. And then he wondered, can I turn these into artificial red blood cells? And he figured out how to put hemoglobin in them, which is the protein in red cells that carry oxygen. And then he sort of ran out of like, how do I tell if this works? and he Googled red blood cell scientists at university, and my name came up, and he called me and said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. Come over and let's see if it works." I mean, seriously, that's what happened. And it didn't work, but I realized that what he had done was going to solve a big problem in the blood substitute field. It turns out that the chemistry I was studying in regular red cells was getting disrupted by artificial red cells, and that the way he had designed, without intending to, the way he had designed this new red cell would solve that problem. And so we began to work on it together, and it's been a major focus of my lab since.
I can imagine. And when I was introduced to KaloCyte and had a look, and the whole concept of artificial blood, like for me as someone who's obviously not in the field, is like I immediately went artificial blood and relating it to the film industry, when people make fake blood in that sense. And certainly here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in the US and all around the world, is there's always a drive, isn't there, for people to donate blood. There's never enough blood around, and that's real blood, inverted commas. So immediately I was like, wow, if this is a thing and it becomes a real thing, it's an absolute kind of game changer. Obviously, I think that word gets used a lot, but this feels like a game changer. You mentioned a little bit of the origin story there, but very simply, KaloCyte's main product here is Arrhythma. Can you explain that, like, as simply or as
Sure.
complicated as you can?
Yeah. Yeah. So why do people want to make artificial blood in the first place? So you mentioned one reason is there never seems to be enough natural blood, but that's not really the solution we're striving to provide. There's another underappreciated problem, which is our ability to provide transfusions is limited by something called the cold chain. So blood is the living tissue, and you have to handle it safely in order for it to work, and it spoils very fast. What's
That's why you
outside.
see sometimes people with
Right.
blood on their motorbikes zooming right
Yeah,
through.
yeah, in a cooler, right? Okay, so it's not practical to deliver transfusion outside of hospital settings. And you think like, well, why would you want to, right? Well, the issue is people get injured outside of hospitals. That's where they get injured.
Yeah.
All the trauma, I mean, trauma is not occurring in the hospital or on the front steps. It's occurring in remote locations with the military, obviously very remote locations. And if people are more than 5 or 10 minutes away from an accident department or emergency department, then you will bleed to death. And in the US alone, there's about 20,000 people a year who just bleed to death before they can get to a hospital. So the gap we're trying to fill is to provide transfusions outside of hospital settings at the point of injury, where someone's like getting pulled out of a car or bleeding in their living room or in an ambulance ride on the way to the emergency department. So the key is it has to be shelf stable, and you have to be able to store it at ambient temperature. And for military use, it has to be lightweight, easy to use. So we have made shelf stable dried blood, meaning it's a dry powder that a medic adds water to, and then you have blood. Now,
Easy.
as easy as that, right? So that's the indication we're trying to fill. Now, it's not intended to be a replacement for natural blood once you're in the hospital, although there's some ultimate opportunities for its use there. And if you're using it, and unfortunately, if it really works, it might create an increase in demand for blood because all the people who were dying are now going to show up alive in the emergency department, and some of them will need more blood. So, ironically, it may further strain the blood supply. Now,
Mm.
in resource limited settings like sub Saharan Africa, where the donor pool is polluted with HIV and hepatitis, or they don't have the proper resources for robust blood banking, it can be a substitute. It's better than no blood, but it isn't going to be better than natural blood in the hospital setting.
It's incredible. It's very interesting there. You say as well is like kind of solving one problem, but then understanding there will be knock on effects. It's not kind of the answer to everything, isn't it? Through this journey, and I know it's been kind of a number of years. What when it comes to the science, and you're very much like obviously involved in that. What have been like those toughest, I don't know, challenges when it comes to the science that you've faced over the years?
Sure. There's a new problem every step. So
Mhm.
the first was figuring out how to even make the artificial red cells. The next was how to compose the artificial membrane. So there's a set of different sort of what we call lipids. So these are fat molecules. Cells are enclosed in a bubble of fat, each
Mhm.
cell in our body, even your skin cells, every cell. And so we have to design that and figure out how to build it and make all of them the same. And then we have to make it biocompatible so that the immune system doesn't reject it. And then we have to make it so that it will capture and release oxygen. So those are opposite tasks, right? So it's almost like think of a magnet. So a magnet can be very good at picking up metal, but then it has to let go. So that's an
Mm.
electromagnet, that can grab and then release. The hemoglobin in our red cell does that effectively, but it does so because of the cell environment, not because of its own properties. So we had to replicate that chemistry artificially, which is what we call the wetware of the
Mhm.
erythromer that controls the oxygen availability so that it's very high in the lung and very low in tissue. And then we had to make sure that we don't interfere with the normal vascular routing reflexes that I was studying before that I told you about. And the the shell design that encapsulates the hemoglobin does that. And then we had to figure out how to freeze dry it so that you could rehydrate it and it would work just as well as before you freeze dried it. And
Yeah.
then we had to make it stable. So with temperature extremes and things like that. And
It's
then we have to make sure that it reconstitutes quickly and easily so that someone without a lot of medical training can just hydrate it and use it. So it's packaged. We had to design the packaging. And so the packaging is like a cold pack where you squeeze it and activate it. So,
No, I've seen the
yeah,
prototype, and yeah, there's there's an element that reminds me of like my kids have had like the like the glow stick
glow
where you
stick.
break the
Right.
glow stick and it comes out. It's a
That's
very
right.
similar concept, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
You've come all those changes. There must be some incredible moments like those eureka and breakthrough moments in the journey. If you had to kind of pick one or two of those where you go, yes, we've got it. What would those moments be?
Well, the first time, I mean, honestly, there was a eureka moment when I understood what Dr. Pan had done before we even
Really?
tested it. But I realized, oh my God, this concept
Mm.
is going to work. Now that was almost 12 years ago. But know when there's an idea that kind of solves a problem. And then it's just working through the practical implementation. So that was a big one. The first time we tested it in a rat, and that was amazing, exciting
Yeah.
experience. And then, there have been other big steps. The first time we successfully resuscitated and a rabbit, so we took out half its blood and put it into shock and replaced it. And then when we had our first primate experiments that were successful, that was a big moment. So there are a lot of small technical moments, but those are the big watershed.
Okay, man.
Mo
Yeah. You've mentioned it a couple of times where kind of this impacts on patients and things. Where do you like if you look forward and you get to the point of, human trials, hopefully, and then it's going commercially, where do you see the biggest impact? You've mentioned the military a couple of times. Is that kind of where you see in those remote spaces or where there's the absence of real blood in that sense?
Yeah, so it's intended to be used where blood is not available or not readily available. So
Mhm.
those are austere locations. So that's obviously the military. Sadly, the way things are in the world, there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And everybody's seen that famous movie Black Hawk Down. So those boys all bled to death. They none of them had lethal injuries. They could have lived if they could have gotten blood, and they get trapped. And this is a huge issue with the military, is that, they have devastating injuries. They go into shock right away. The primary injury, if it's survivable, now obviously there are many that aren't, okay, but if the primary injury is survivable, let's just say they blow off your leg, you can bleed very fast before the tourniquet gets on, and now you're in shock. Now everything is getting injured because there's no oxygen delivery to the brain, the vital organs, and so on. And you've got minutes to restore oxygen delivery before you get irreversible secondary injuries. That requires a transfusion at the site, at the point of the injury. So that we can fix that problem with this material, and that will happen, at war, and hopefully, there won't be a lot of use for that. But there's, obviously active conflict pretty much any day. But also in ambulances, we expect this to be used in the pre-hospital setting and hopefully change trauma care.
Yeah.
Could also be used on the space station or on Mars, or there's no way to take blood to Mars, okay? And you don't have a blood bank. There's not enough of a population to have a donor pool. So now obviously that's not going to happen tomorrow, but if we're going to be able to function in austere settings, we have to be able to manage injuries. They're going to be accidents.
Mm.
And so because it's freeze dried, it can be transported easily.
Yeah. So it is fascinating. The opportunities kind of do seem endless, and it is absolutely fascinating. It can really change this kind of emergency and trauma care. I definitely see that. Looking forward, and obviously, kind of KaloCyte are on this journey, and looking at the next stages for your business. Going kind of like wider in the field of what do you see as like the future of like blood substitutes, if we were to use that phrase? Are other people working on it? Is now
Yeah, there's a group in Japan that's actually further along than we
Mhm.
are. It's a different product. It's not freeze dried,
Yeah.
but they're already in human trials, early human trials. They don't intend to distribute it outside Japan, but
Mhm.
its use is supposed to be in the same sort of context as we've
Yeah.
discussed. There are other teams, none that are doing anything quite like what we're doing, but I suspect there will be next generation. Once you start something, obviously other people try. Perfusing organs outside the body. So that's another big indication. So when we take an organ out, kidney, liver, heart, whatever, for
Mhm.
transplant, it's also sitting in a cooler, and it has to get back into another body within a fixed period of time. And also, there's no opportunity to, quote, revive the organ. However, if you can support the organ outside the body, then you can transport it. You can even optimize its performance. So ex vivo organ perfusion will be a big indication. You can't use natural blood for a couple reasons in this situation. There's no good transfusion support for veterinary medicine.
Okay.
So the same exact erythromer can be given to a person or a poodle or a parakeet. I mean, it's universal, so it can be given to any animal, and that's just not feasible, to have blood banks for dogs or
Mm.
cats or whatever. So a lot of animals die, and they're working dogs.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's not just people's
Right.
pets; it's all the
Right.
animals that work in emergency services and everything.
Right. And then there are other niche applications in the hospital for which blood is not ideal. But then it can also be a platform where you can put pharmaceuticals on the shell or in the payload and do novel things, where you could treat an enzyme defect. You could potentially help to manage kidney failure or diabetes because of what you do inside the circulating particle. So it could also be an accessory organ because it would be circulating and you could cause it to execute certain tasks. That's, fantasy down the road. The first job is just to do what red cells do,
Yeah.
and then we can start doing interesting things.
Well, I think you're already doing interesting things now. Obviously, going back for like ending with a little bit kind of about yourself from that kind of that first moment when you were in the ICU and the kids, all the way through to kind of what you're doing now. It's been, incredible kind of journey for yourself. What is it that kind of continues to keep kind of you motivated and energized and things about all of this work?
Well, I never imagined that anything from my laboratory would actually get into people in my
Mm,
lifetime. So this is, a dream come true. Most of us don't get that opportunity. And
yeah.
so, that's really what gets me up in the morning. Plus, it's I'm having a ball. I mean, it's fun. I love,
Mm,
science. I love working with the people that are on our team. And it's exciting to get, and I'm energized by not knowing exactly what the problem is that we need to solve. And, that's exciting and fun. And we're very fortunate that we've got a well-resourced team and great leaders and good scientists. And so, you know, I like who I work with. I like what I do, and it feels worth doing. So, you know,
it always helps. I think you make the point there. It's like it's easy sometimes, or the simplest thing to focus on the end goal, but what motivates us more often than not is the journey. The journey's the enjoyable bit, isn't it? A lot of people reach this perceived end goal, and then they're like, "No, that wasn't that enjoyable in the end. It's the journey."
yes, yeah, it's fun to do, which
Yeah.
is so I'm very lucky in that regard.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about lucky, I think we're very lucky for you to kind of take the time and chat with us. It's going to be, fascinating to follow KaloCyte's story. I think certainly from my point of view, there'll be plenty of people kind of watching this who wouldn't even be aware that this was a possibility, let alone, we're quite close to making it a reality as well. I just wanted to say thank you very much, and definitely watch this space. I think.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure. Appreciate the interest.
Thank you.